tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
Good evening, everyone out there listening tonight to RBLR Sports. This is James Knowles coming at you for the RBLR Rowdies show. Specifically tonight, I am here with my esteemed co-host, Carlos. Carlos, I think that you might have had a pretty good weekend. Please tell me how you're doing now after all of that.
Hey, James. I had a fantastic weekend. Thanks for asking. No, I was down in South Florida, not at the Rowdies game on Saturday. I was a little further north in Fort Lauderdale at the Ecuador versus Cabo Verde game, which was a really great time. If you're listening and you don't know, my whole family is Ecuadorian. I was born here in Tampa, but I was down there with my dad for that Ecuador game. It's kind of one of their last send-off games before the World Cup, and it was a great chance to be down there and take in that game and meet some of the players. But as you would imagine, I had my phone out the whole first half, ESPN Plus open, and watching the Rowdies game and keeping up very closely with that. So yeah, it was a great weekend, and we had a great time. Obviously, the Rowdies won, and we'll get into all of that. Down in South Florida, Ecuador won, and across the Bay, the Tampa Bay Lightning won too. So yeah, we can't complain. It's been a great weekend. James, how about you? How's your weekend been?
Yeah, I experienced all of the sporting ups. Really, not too many downs this past weekend because, as you said, the Lightning did well, but in the soccer world, specifically the Rowdies, did win their game. We're going to talk about that, of course. The U.S. men's national team won their game, and earlier today, the U.S. women's national team was announced for the CONCACAF W Championship. So I'm super excited to see that this summer. It's just been lots of cool sports, lots of cool sports results, lots of cool sports stories. There's so much to talk about. So, you know what? Why don't we just get into that now? This past weekend, as we have been alluding to, the Rowdies went away to play the Miami FC, and we got a 2-1 win. Exactly. We got a 2-1 win down in South Florida. This result means that Carlos and I each get 1 point for guessing a win without getting the right scoreline. So unfortunate on that side, but I will take a point when I can get it in this prediction game, the way that we have got it going. This weekend, the Rowdies will host Charleston Battery at Al Lang on Saturday. It will also be the Rowdies Pride Night this weekend, so please make sure you come out and celebrate. It is going to be a great time, like it usually is, plus with the added benefit of everybody enjoying the Pride Night celebrations too. So there will be a little bit of team news that we need to get to by the end of the show. I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that we still have some stuff to get to even after the game review and the next game preview. And before we get into all of that, really quickly, I do want to say, please follow RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And you can get us at RBLR Sports. And please like and subscribe to our podcast on all major podcast platforms. We are there. So now that all of that's out of the way, Carlos, if you could help me and walk us through the quick review of the game away to the Miami FC.
The Tampa Bay Rowdies were down south at the Miami FC. I don't get tired of saying the in front of Miami. It's so silly.
No.
It really is. Anyway, CJ Cochran started in goal, as been the usual in the past month. Guillen, Scarlett, Wyke rounded out the back line. And then moving into the midfield, Areman, Ekra, Hilton, and Antley characterized that sort of holding midfield area. And then LaCava and Leo have been playing in that wing, more as forwards, but definitely dropping back into the midfield position with Kyle Gregg rounding out the 11 at the striker role. The Miami FC had a game midweek and looked pretty heavy-legged for the first 60 minutes. They were very sluggish, very tired, and the Rowdies pretty much controlled most of the game. That's not to say there weren't a ton of offensive chances for the Tampa Bay Rowdies. It was a lot of, stalemate in the midfield, Rowdies possession, but the Rowdies did score 2 goals during that period. One of them ended up being an own goal off a free kick from Lewis Hilton, and the other one was a penalty drawn by Jake LaCava, which Leo Fernandez beautifully slotted into the bottom left-hand corner of the goal. Really perfect placement there on that penalty. But the last 30 minutes were a definite real test of the Rowdies' defensive strength as well as the depth. Jordan Scarlett was subbed off at halftime, possibly because of a yellow card, possibly because he was actually called up to the Jamaican national team. So congratulations to him. He linked up with them that night after the game. And Van Kazel stepped in later on and played a great game. So the Rowdies held up well, but they did concede one goal, which would end up being the final goal of the game. Rowdies would win 2-1 and would have a great time celebrating with their supporting fans that traveled all the way down south. So always a great time to see the Rowdies fans down there in South Florida. I believe it is our closest league rival. So probably the easiest chance to travel. And there was a good showing from our Rowdies family down there. So with that being said, let's get into some of the questions and analysis that we have to review this game. James, why don't you take us away?
Yeah, so as you mentioned earlier, the first 60 minutes of the game, I think that the Rowdies were just, totally dominant to the point where I don't know that Miami had, the halftime stats were 4 shots to 7 shots in favor of the Rowdies, but only one of those from the Miami FC was actually on target. So it was 0 for 2 in terms of big chances, again in favor of the Rowdies. If you look at all that, Miami really didn't have a lot going for them. So with all of that being said, they looked pretty bad in the first 60 minutes. And, we could have really had the run of it, in my opinion. How do we feel about their performance during that time? Should we have possibly done even better with the 60 minutes that we had before Miami made some substitutions and actually brought the game back to us?
Yeah, no, I think this question was really interesting to me because Miami did play a poor first 60 minutes, as you talked about for a second there. But I think it was in part because of how we kind of imposed ourselves um, on their field, on their turf. I think we did a really good job of just kind of stifling their attack, which, I mean, as you know, and as we know from their victory over here in Ao Lang last month, they don't really need a lot of space or a lot of chances to create dangerous opportunities on goal. Um, but they didn't really have any of that for the first 60 minutes. I think we imposed ourselves really nicely in the midfield and kind of shut them down. So on that end of things, I think we played a great first 60 minutes, and I think that'd carry on through the rest of the game, with the exception of the one goal that they scored. Um, but if we look at our attack here, we did score 2 goals, but as I mentioned earlier in the recap, one of them was an own goal off a free kick, and the other one was a penalty that I personally would say was questionable at best. LaCava had a great run, but I think he sold it a little bit, and Leo Fernandez obviously put that away really nicely. Um, but it seems like, well, here we are once again, and we're looking back at the goal scorers. Obviously, one of them was own goal. Fernandez was the other. So that's another game without our striker scoring a goal, which I think is going to be a problem if that's not fixed anytime soon. I mean, Kyle Gregg had another goalless game. He hit the post again. We heard that a lot against Tulsa last week. So there's something not really clicking in the offensive side of things. We scored 2 goals, but again, they weren't in open play. They weren't necessarily from, dangerous chances we created. And my biggest concern really is Kyle Gregg at the top. Again, not scoring, and frankly, hitting the post again. Frankly, like not really doing the job that he's there for. And that sounds kind of harsh. I don't mean to come across that harsh, but it's just a little concerning now because this is another game without our striker scoring the goals. So I don't know if you have any extra thoughts on that, James, or if you agree with me or disagree with me. But that's been the biggest concern for me over these past couple of games, and I think that concern showed its head again against Miami.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think what we can dial down a little more closely into the strikers here and the attacking unit in a bit. Let's save that for the time being. But it's definitely the case that, um, there's kind of no other way to put it. Kyle Gregg can't buy a goal at the moment. He's actually it's kind of the same case that we have seen with other strikers for the Rowdies. You could look at other cases all around the soccer world. And, there are players who have gotten themselves into positions over and over where they should be scoring. You can absolutely say, like, he was in the right position to score against Tulsa. He was in the right position to score against Louisville. He was in the right position to score against Miami again. But it's also very hard to blame the striker when you're hitting the post, because as much as that might not count as an on target shot on the statistics, I actually don't know if it will or won't, but that's just the most unlucky you can get. You've probably beat the defenders, beat the goalkeeper, and then it hits the post. That's so rough. But obviously, when you keep hitting the post over and over, and you haven't scored in all of those last 3 games, I guess it is, but all of those opportunities where you ultimately did hit the post, yeah, something is in his head for sure. And we saw this earlier in the season with Sebastian Guenzati. Now, Sebastian Guenzati has unfortunately made his way to the bench, and we're seeing him used as a substitute. That is not what we're used to, certainly, as Rowdies fans over the past couple of seasons, but it has, in certain ways, worked to the team's benefit because other players have stepped up and they're now filling this role. So with Sebastian Guenzati on the bench and Steven Dos Santos is currently out through injury, what do? It seems like, despite having brought in all of this depth, we only have one striker who, is getting into the right positions, but he still can't score. So I'm kind of at a loss with that one. Again, we'll talk about this a little bit more in another question here. I don't want to get further than that, but in all honesty, what I'm left with right now is just, I feel so badly for Kyle Gregg. This poor guy. It must be so rough in the locker room after these games.
Yeah. No, I mean, it does seem like it's a little bit unlucky at this point. But like you said, I mean, we'll get into all of that in a little bit here. Now, moving from this conversation up top, let's go all the way to the other side of the field. Let's go all the way to the back here. I want to focus in on our defense, especially in this last 30 minutes when things kind of started to sway in Miami's favor. As we know, soccer is very much a game of momentum, lots of momentum swings. And while we were up 2-0, Ba scored a really fantastic goal for Miami from a very narrow angle to make it a 2-1 game with a little under half an hour to go. Things could have gone rapidly bad for the Rowdies here because Miami had all the momentum and because they were really starting to create some more dangerous chances. But we held up nicely. Obviously, we didn't concede another goal. And our defense held up adequately. James, tell me, what do you think about that last 30 minutes and how our defense held up? Could we have done something better? Could we have prevented that goal and had a shutout here? Or do you think we played it all right?
Yeah, I think, well, we definitely played it all right. It's not, we only gave up the 1 goal, obviously, that preserved 3 points. So hurrah in that sense. But let's look a little deeper than that. Let's open this baby up and try and move some things around and see what's actually going on. Defensively, Jordan Scarlett did come out, as you said. He came out at halftime, and what Neil Collins said in the post game, we did not actually get to do a press conference, unfortunately. But their PR staff, Jake Nutting there, he asked Neil some questions and then he sent the video out afterwards. So we do know that Neil Collins said Jordan Scarlett came off because he was already on a yellow card. They didn't want to risk it. And another thing that you mentioned, he was ultimately called up to the Jamaican national team. Did that factor in? In all honesty, without him having said so, I'm going to say that probably did factor into Neil Collins' head, especially with how dominant we were in the first half and how little how little they had. Yeah, right. I can't forget that, but how little they had created in the first half. So when you look at what the rest of the game, how that went defensively, I still think that there is one problem with the defense, like glaring more than any, and that's just a lack of continuity with the players who have been used back there. And again, Aaron Guillen, Forrest Lasso, Jordan Scarlett last year, those were not only an iron defense, but like they were an iron unit. They were, and Evan Loro, frankly. They were back there every game, and it was almost never changing. So that really helps a defensive unit when they all know what each other, like what they're capable of doing, where they're going to go, when they're going to win stuff, when they might not win stuff. If you can trust a guy to pretty much never lose in a 1v1 situation, then you can say, okay, then I'll just mark my man and I'll compensate for anything that might happen once he wins the ball and, gets rid of it. Maybe it comes back down our throats a different way. So, okay, I'll line up that way. Maybe one thing that we saw a lot in this game was Josh Perez, the winger for the Miami. He would peel off of his marker and try and move inside. So he would be, start on the wing, and then he would come inside in between our midfield line and our back line, and he would try and get in some space in front of Aaron Guillen on the left side, or if it was over on the other side, then it would be, well, whoever was out there, because it was Lawrence Wyke, and then it wasn't, and then it was again. So, it's just this lack of continuity is the one problem that I can see here. But that's not a thing that is easily fixed when you are down a player like Robert Castellanos, as we are, and then you have other players who offer things elsewhere, like we have with Lawrence Wyke, like we have with Connor Antley, and like we have possibly with even Thomas Van Azeel now. So I would just like to see a team our team settle down. We get a unit in the back line, and they kind of stick with it for a couple of games, and maybe we'll see how it plays out after that. That'll be a little harder this week, possibly, for something that we're going to get to with Jordan Scarlett again coming on. Now, Connor Antley moved into the back line when Jordan Scarlett went off, and then there was a while there. Van Azeel stepped into the back line for the last 20 minutes, and that allowed Lawrence Scarlett to step up. For a moment, I thought that Connor Antley had hurt himself such that he would have to be substituted, and that Lawrence Wyke was going to go right back to the back line, but luckily, Connor Antley's problem was not actually something that needed to, that required a substitution. That is my biggest issue, is I just want to see us get that continuity. And then afterwards, the other thing is Miami is like a relatively good team. And on their day, at their moment, they can definitely put a team on their heels. They can make you as a defender like really sweat. But most of those players who you can expect to do that were on the bench to start the game, and that has to do, I believe, with their game on Wednesday that they had to play. So, they just didn't have enough in the tank as an opposition team to ultimately break us down and get something there. But yeah, I really would have preferred that when they did make those substitutions and the guys came on who are their general starters and their general threats, we definitely could have handled that much better.
Sure. No, I can see that for sure. And on the point of consistency on the back line, that's definitely been a theme. I feel like every week that we've talked about this defense, really all season, with the Castellanos injury happening in that first game. On the other hand, looking back at the defense from last year that was so consistent for game in, game out, we got really lucky with injuries with that back line last year, because if one injury, happened to bring down Lasso, Scarlett, Guillen, in the same way it brought down Castellanos, I think we could be looking at a totally different season last year. Totally different season. And I think that the situation we found ourselves in with the Castellanos injury week one has made this team, we're still finding our footing every game, which is all right. But I think it's made this team much more dynamic and much more adaptable to different situations, different injuries, missing players. Scarlett is, obviously probably not going to be with us on Saturday, or will he? Do you know, James?
So right now he should be with the Jamaican national team, and their game is tomorrow evening. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that game is in Mexico. And if that is the case, then he's obviously going to have to travel all the way back from Mexico and, get ready to be with the team on Saturday. I don't think that that's impossible, certainly. I just think it will be a little bit of a problem. If he has to travel to Jamaica and then back to Florida, that'll be even less travel. So, I expect that he will be available, if not starting from the opening whistle. But
Sure.
so that would be the potential options with Jordan
Right.
Scarlett.
Right. So I mean, let's say let's take the example that happened before the Louisville. Let's say Jordan Scarlett gets stuck in an airport in Mexico City for whatever reason. I don't know.
Right.
Like I'm at a point now at this point in the season where with how much Antley and Wyke have played on the back line and how much more comfortable they seem now than they did at the beginning of the year, rotating back and forth on that back line. And with the signing of Van Kazel, I feel much more comfortable in a situation where, Jordan Scarlett wouldn't be able to play on Saturday for whatever reason, right?
Right.
And I think that's not something that I could have said last month even. Somehow well, not really somehow, it's really just been time that's gotten Wyke and Antley comfortable with moving back and forth as needed, a sort of like plug and play situation. And with the Van Kazel like depth and dynamic play that he brings to the back line, I feel pretty comfortable. And I think that the last 30 minutes, even though we didn't handle it perfectly, I think we handled it obviously well enough to, come out with 3 points. And the goal that we gave up, you know, wasn't really a result of our defense playing bad. I think we held up. Looking back at that goal that Miami scored, we held up pretty well, but it was simply a half-second lapse in judgment from Sebastian Dahlgaard, who just totally lost his man. And then Leo Fernandez was forced to drop back and try and stop Bob before he scored the goal. But obviously, that didn't work. So even the goal that we did concede didn't come down to the fault of whoever was playing on the back line at that time. And I think Van Kazel stepped in really nicely those last 20 minutes when he was called upon.
Yeah.
And I think especially with Scarlett getting subbed off at halftime and Dahlgaard coming on for him, the ability to just drop Antley back to that back line and put Dahlgaard on that wing back area, that I think that has been the biggest improvement from the beginning of the season. That ability to be more dynamic and more comfortable with moving our back line and midfield around as needed. So consistency like last year would be great. I just feel like it's not the same team. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's not Loro, it's not Lasso. CJ Cochran has proven to be like a fantastic goalie, but they just don't have the same chemistry. And I don't think you can really build that sort of same chemistry without, somebody who plays that natural center back position like Lasso. And I think we're pretty deep in the season now, and I think Van Kazel is a great signing, but he's not, the Lasso figure. He's a dynamic back, which is great. And it's not what we had last year, but it's more dynamic, and I'm frankly very comfortable with it now. And I think it's only going to get better, honestly, as we progress throughout the season. And it's proven to be successful in the last few games. So I don't really see why it won't be successful, hopefully, on Saturday. But we're going to get into that preview in a little bit. So do you have any more comments on that, James?
I have one more quick thing that I want to cover, and it goes to back up what you were saying about the people that we have in the back line being sufficient to do the job that is asked of them. I think what really happened in the second half that kind of changed the way that the game was going for us and the Miami. One thing that I noted in my sheet here was, Sebastian Dahlgaard came on for Jordan Scarlett, so he went to right wing back. And then Connor Antley went to the center back position, and that was at halftime. Our next substitution for the Rowdies was somewhere around the 60th minute, which you'll notice is what we've been talking about for the first hour, the Rowdies controlling the game, and then not afterwards. Lucky Mkosana came on for Kyle Gregg, and then after that, we had a couple more substitutions later on in the game. But I think that what really kind of happened here is that we kind of lost the way that we were playing in that first portion of the game. So, Leo Fernandez and Jake LaCava don't just serve the the purpose of attacking. They serve a dual purpose because they are also there to act as the first defenders when the opposition have the ball. And, when the Miami, as they are known, everybody should be aware, they will have the ball at the back line, and we apply pressure to them so that they don't have an easy time, breaking out and finding a pass wherever they might try to pass it to. A lot of times in that last 30 minutes, Josh Perez was getting into space, and they had the time on the ball to wait for him to make that move and then find him. They had a lot of time, in fact, when the Miami had the ball for their defensive outside players. So on the left, it was Aiden Stanley, and on the right, it was originally what is his name? It's so many C's, like I forget what his name actually is, but it's Callum Chapman Page. That's what it is. He was the guy on the right side, and they were actually getting into the attack a lot more because they didn't have somebody applying that pressure. Ultimately, we even saw Jake LaCava coming off late, and we saw, I believe, Leo Fernandez coming off late as well. Those two guys were not able to, when Junior Eto and Sebastian Guenzati came on for those two, then we really didn't have anybody applying that pressure, because as much as Lucky Mkusana does offer a lot, he does not offer the same pressing game as all of the players that I mentioned above him. So that did allow the Miami to get a lot more going their way when they had their center backs involved. And if you look at the goal that Othello Baugh actually scored for them, Aiden Stanley was involved in that, and I believe he was on the touchline and played the ball into Othello Baugh so that he could get himself down to the end line where he actually scored the goal.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a great point. I like that first half, and then going into the second half was characterized by some really good Rowdies play. The press that has started to characterize the past few weeks of our style, that was very present early on in the game and throughout most of the game, like you've talked about. But yeah, I could totally see what you mean when you said we stepped away from our game towards the latter part of that game against Miami. And that press is hard to maintain for 90 minutes with 90 minutes of pressing the whole field, but I think we could have done better for sure to keep up that style of play at least a little bit longer, because I think you're right when you're saying that we moved away from that style too quickly. I think we gave Miami too much time to work their way back into the game.
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe we committed to defending the lead a little too early, but again, playing down there has always been a little difficult for us. So maybe there's something with the field. Miami's always pretty much a good team that gives us a challenge. So, I'm pretty comfortable with the 2-1 win, but I think there's things we could have done better for sure. And that's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah.
But moving on from that, I want to go back to something we were dancing around a little bit earlier. And it's kind of my biggest thing from the past few games. We talked about this issue of, or maybe not issue, but this theme of defensive continuity or lack thereof. But I want to take that word and that theme of continuity and kind of apply it to our front three now as it's been. We've had Leo and LaCava starting as that sort of wing forward position. And then Kyle Gregg has started for the past, I can't remember exactly how many games, but it's been a little bit now that Kyle Gregg has been the starting guy up top. How do you rate the performance of those front three over the past few games? And maybe we can apply it to this game specifically. How do you rate the performance of these three, Leo, Gregg, and LaCava, in this game against Miami? And I guess in their time together up top over the past few games.
Yeah, I think that, much like everybody, I'm pretty sure that Jake LaCava and Leo Fernandez will be getting 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10.
Right.
It just depends on the game. They might even be getting a 10 out of 10 for how many goals that those two have put in over the course of the season so far.
Right.
Leo Fernandez, I think, has been just, a man on fire. I mentioned a couple episodes ago that when we did, our predictions for this season overall, and we started with what would our general starting 11 be? I said that eventually Jake Areman would work his way onto the left wing back starting spot, but that is because I expected Leo Fernandez to move up into the attack, and he has done that. it took a little, it took a little longer than I expected, and there were some bumps along the way for sure, but it has worked out that way. And Jake LaCava came in, and he actually filled in as one of the starters that I didn't expect to see from my predicted starting 11 before the season actually got going. Either way, I think that everyone can see that Leo Fernandez has more than justified his position there. He is not only good at applying that press that we so need to keep opposition defenses from being able to slow the game down and try and build up the patterns that whatever the team is trying to do to actually score and beat us. I think that he is super good at that, and he's also very good at just keeping the ball. He's good on the dribble, and he can find players he's got a very good passing range. I think that every so often it lets him down, but that happens for every player, of course. Jake LaCava is probably one of the brightest players in this whole league. He is so fun to watch. He will never shy away from a chance to run at a defender. You know that much. He will
Right.
always take the chance to try and beat somebody. He loves doing that. He loves putting people on their butts, and I love to see it. So that leaves our last player, of course, and that's Kyle Gregg. Kyle Gregg is starting, I think, right now, mostly because of deficiencies with the other players, and we can get into that. Steven Dos Santos is deficient right now in the fact that he is injured. That one's pretty simple, obviously.
Right.
He and Dayon Harris are out right now with injuries, and Sebastian Dalgard apparently was ill a couple weeks ago, but he's obviously back from that now, so that's good for everyone else on the field too. With Steven Dos Santos being out injured, then our two kind of starting 11 option, or our two kind of number 9 options in the starting 11, that is right now Kyle Gregg or Sebastian Guenzati. And you look at what Neil Collins asks of his number 9s. Sebastian Guenzati is much more of a player who will, get at the ball at the very end of a play and try and score. Obviously, we saw him do that over and over and over last season. And, I think that he was a lot more, I think that he's a lot better as, a striker who doesn't have to necessarily take part in the hold-up play aspect of the game, whereas Kyle Gregg and Steven Dos Santos, I should say, are much better at the hold-up play in the game. So, the ball is at your feet, your back is towards their goal, and you have a defender on your back as well. You're trying to keep yourself in between the defender and the ball and letting your team kind of get into the positions that they need so that you can find somebody and then they can go off and set up a goal. They will receive the ball and, like I said, hold off the defender, but they will receive it in an area that's much more advanced up the field so that the rest of the team can kind of get up there into that position and build up that way. We saw Kyle Gregg receive a lot of long balls against the Miami, from Aaron Guillen, from Lawrence White. I believe even Jordan Scarlett tried a couple of long balls over the top. His retention when he got those, I was not super impressed. It's very hard, obviously. It's a super tough skill because, you are supposed to not only bring the ball down and control it in a way that, it's not going to bounce away from you, but also you're supposed to do that with a defender on your back. And he's just as big as you, if not bigger. And he's trying to elbow you. He's trying to kick you. He's trying to do whatever to put you off of controlling that ball. I'm not saying that it's a simple thing to do, but, that is obviously what they're being paid for here. And Kyle Gregg was not always great at it, although he did do a couple of different nice little layoffs that allowed the Rowdies to continue to build up their attacking play. And, I just don't know if Sebastian Guenzati can do that. I would really kind of like to see him do it at this point. I'm not sure about you, Carlos, but, is it time? Here's a better way to put it, I suppose. Is it time to start Sebastian Guenzati again?
For me, in short, yes. It feels like the last episode I spent some time like railing on Kyle Gregg, and I started off this episode talking about how he hit the post and hasn't scored many goals. And I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm hating on Kyle Gregg for whatever reason. Like,
Of course.
I love Kyle Gregg. He's a great guy and he's very talented, but he gets paid to do a job and he's not doing it very well right now. I mean, he's getting in the right position, like you said. Maybe he's getting unlucky. He's hit the post 3 times now over these past 3 games. but it just feels like he's not. Like maybe this was some sort of experiment to try and get Guenzati some motivation. We've talked about this before. Maybe it's sort of like a motivational tactic for Guenzati. But I feel like, especially with this last game against Miami, Guenzati came in I believe the 80th minute, and by this point we had fully committed to just protecting the lead. It was 2-1, and Guenzati's basically going up there by himself, chasing the ball. Lucky Mkusanda's dropping back a little bit. Everybody's kind of committing to this defensive position. And Guenzati, while obviously he's doing the defending as well, there's one moment in the match that stands out to me where he basically takes on like 4 guys by himself and almost creates a goal scoring opportunity. Continues the press, and takes the ball again, and ends up just with one defender to beat who steps up and blocks his shot. He ends up chopping off a good almost 2 minutes just in that run of play by himself. Guenzati, I mean, he's our guy. He's our guy, one, because he's started so many games, he scored so many goals for us, but he's our guy because of his skills, because of his talent, because we know he can score those goals. He's been in this team for multiple years at this point. Him and Leo Fernandez have been the guys who've been here the longest up to now, or with the current team. And I think we've had this period now where he's not starting games. He's not playing very much, honestly. He's coming in the last 20 minutes tops. I think if he's not going to start, it's at least time to start bringing him back at halftime. If the Kyle Gregg experiment isn't working, if he's not scoring goals in the first half and maybe even early on to the second half like we saw against Miami, he's just not really there. I like the Mkosana sub. Mkosana is a great super sub. But I think this is a time to bring in Guenzati much earlier than we have been. I really want to see him starting again. I mean, he hasn't scored much this season either, but the Kyle Gregg experiment hasn't really been working either. So if we have to pick between these two guys that really haven't been producing that much, I'm going to take Guenzati, who we know can do that. And Greg, he's a man who has scored goals. He's a striker with, great reputation. But yeah, I think we even talked about this last week. Kyle Gregg isn't necessarily like the striker that you will rely on to score like a golden boot amount of goals at the end of the year, even in his prime with like Louisville, right? So Guenzati has been that guy that, I mean, at his prime, he can score that amount of goals. And I think by his nature, he'll be able to do that again. And so yes, I think it's time we start Seba again. He has the ability to keep up that press that we've incorporated into our system these past few games. He's a speedy guy, and I think he can do that very well. So yeah, I think it's time to start Seba again. I don't know if you agree with me, but frankly, I think it's time. Just not to, I'm not saying we shouldn't play Kyle Gregg, because he's talented and he has a role on the team. But I think we should start moving back towards what we know, and what we know has succeeded. I mean, we've gotten to back-to-back, USL finals, kind of riding the back partially of Sebastian Guenzati. So I'm not saying like he, deserves a spot like to start every game just because of what he's done in the past. But I think if we're picking, like I said, if we're picking between two guys that haven't really produced a ton this year, let's maybe move back to the guy that we know for a fact can produce given the opportunities and, isn't hitting the post every other game.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think that I would like to at least check it out for sure. As I said, my one hang up here is I just don't know that Sebastian Guenzati is as good, even, when we're talking Kyle Gregg being the other option. I don't know that Sebastian Guenzati is as good at doing the things that Neil Collins asked the number 9 to do. Sure. But I certainly wouldn't mind seeing it. I think that it would be a perfectly fine thing to try it out. And by the way, the game against Charleston is probably a very good game to do that. But we're going to get into that in a little bit. The one last thing that I want to say before we do our man of the match, we did not get to do the post-game press conference, like I said, but I sure do want to ask Neil Collins about these set pieces. There was some very interesting takes on those. Did you see how they set themselves up there?
Yeah, I mean, especially the corners. This was a big thing I noticed. Like, I feel like every corner looked like, oh my god, the name of the announcer is slipping my mind right now, but he said he used the exact words. He goes, "Feels like every corner has been, straight off like the training ground. Like they've
Yeah.
planned every corner or whatever." And I'm like, I didn't really notice it until he said that, but it seemed like we were playing like every corner was a sort of short, you know, dish off and then the cross and whatnot. I don't know what's going on, but they have something in the works. They have something that they're practicing and training that, you know, for whatever reason, didn't pan out with a bunch of goals this past game against Miami, unless you count the Lewis Hilton, free kick and own goal. But it's interesting, and I don't really mind it. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. There was one in particular in the 20th minute. The Rowdies had a corner, and Lewis Hilton, lined up like he was going to put it across, and instead, what he did is he dropped it to Jake Areman, who was standing
Right.
roughly near the edge of the 18-yard box, the corner of it. And he turns inside as a player from the Miami runs out to put pressure on him. And what does he do? He lays it off into the middle to Lawrence White. Everybody's like, okay, Lawrence White is lining up a shot here. So they all go to press and shut him down for that. Lawrence White does not take a shot. He takes a touch and lays it right back out to Lewis Hilton, who was lining himself up, running into the box, and he receives it on the run, going at the 6-yard box. And I swear, if he had put that away, it would have been just like the Othello ball that Miami actually scored, except 10 times as nice for the setup that it was. He just he really shanked the shot. I gotta unfortunately say that because we don't see that a lot from Lewis Hilton, but yeah, it was a very nice play.
Right.
Anyway, that was where I first was like, excuse me, where is all of this coming from?
Right.
But yeah, I really liked that aspect of the game. So that will do it for our analysis here. The last thing is, Carlos, who is your man of the match? And I will get into mine.
Sure. I think for me, it's a toss up between, obviously Jake LaCava. Like, I feel like you could say his name most games at this point, up there in the conversation for man of the match. He was creating a lot of chances. Found himself one-on-one with Sparrow at some point in the second half, off a really great off the ball run. He's just moving off the ball so well, and it's really tough for defenders to keep up with him, especially when they have to keep up with Leo Fernandez as well. So that duo is so deadly for so many reasons. He's been stacking up on Leo's side sometimes, making those overlapping runs, and he created a lot of the chances that could have, should have, would have been goals in other situations. But they didn't end up in goals. So for that reason, I also want to say Jake Areman had a fantastic game. He has been, I think, the unspoken key to this press that's been working so well. He and Antley, but Areman in particular has really just been like outstanding to me. And I think this game was no exception. He started that press that led to Kyle Gregg hitting the post early on that could have led to the goal. He's been just really solid on the wings, shutting down any wingers that come by his side. This game was no different. He had a great game. I managed to shut down a lot of attacks. And his distributive play was just great as well. So for the sake of not picking LaCava, like once again, I'm going to go with Areman. He had a great game, and I'll stick with him as my man of the match.
Gotcha. Well, mine is kind of in a similar vein. It's not on the attacking side, but it is somebody who was not on, not on the score sheet anyway. I chose Aaron Guillen as my man of the match, and it was because, for the first 60 minutes, as we have said over and over now, Miami was just kind of crap. And the Rowdies were controlling everything. It was kind of smooth sailing, and it really wasn't necessarily even down to one player making anything look good. It was just good teamwork overall, and the Miami not putting up any opposition that could do anything about it. On the flip side, when we went through the last 30 minutes, there was all sorts of change at the back. Like we had talked about, Connor Antley goes back there. He possibly has an injury. Thomas Van Kaziel has to come in at one point, and Lawrence White starts out at the back. He moves up into the midfield. All of this is going on. The one person who was a was a solid rock in the middle of all of this change was Aaron Guillen. And, I've got a couple statistics to throw out there if need be, but I really don't think that it is needed at this point. The narrative is already just that. He proved himself to be steady and reliable in the middle of everything that was going on, while Miami actually started to find their footing and throw what they could at us, including the kitchen sink. But that is why I went with Aaron Guillen.
A solid pick for sure. I mean, like LaCava, I think if I wasn't so, biased like everybody else for goal scorers and whatever, I think Guillen could definitely be in the argument for man of the match, like every game at this point. So anyway, with that being said, let's move on. And before we touch on the standings real quick, and James, you take that away in a second, quick shameless plug for our merch shop. Liking and subscribing is free, but if you need some new threads for whatever reason, they make great gifts. You can support this podcast by heading over to shop.rblrsports.com and checking out all the cool designs we've cooked up, designs for all the teams here in Tampa Bay. Really, really great one that I saw Eureka, the producer of this lovely show, show off earlier today. It was a great Tampa Bay shirt with all 3 Stanley Cups from the Lightning. So with that being said, link in the description. Use the promo code COYR for 10% off all the really, really cool merch we have in the shop. So, James, do you want to take us away through the updated standings with this weekend now behind us?
Yeah, I'll do that, and then we will get into our preview of the home game versus Charleston Battery. So, right now in the East, Memphis still lead with 28 points from 13 games played, coming, like we said last week, kind of out of nowhere to get into this top spot. Not a lot of people rated them. I rated them, but not this highly. So, yeah, they are doing very well for themselves. Louisville City are in second behind them with 27 points from 14 games played, and if you look at the standings, you'll happen to find that a new team is in third position with the Rowdies taking over on 26 points from 15 games played. Congrats to the boys on getting into this spot. Behind us now are Detroit City with a game in hand, however, and they can overtake us. Pittsburgh, Birmingham, and Indy all round out the playoff spots with the Miami right outside them. However, it should be noted they are level on points with Indy 11. Over in the West, Colorado Springs and San Antonio both sit on 30 points with 12 games and 13 games played, respectively. Colorado Springs ahead of them because of the tiebreakers. San Diego, El Paso, New Mexico, Sacramento, and Phoenix all follow them. It has been a rough stretch for Phoenix, and yeah, their form has nearly dropped them out of the playoff spots. So that is something for us to watch out for. That is actually something probably for a lot more of the West Coast fans to watch out for, because we have already got our obligatory beatdown of Phoenix in this season. And yeah, I don't mind gloating at this point going down.
Yeah. Did we end Phoenix Rising Football Club? That's the question everybody is asking right now. No, Phoenix is going to be all right. They have so much talent. I think they'll bounce back and at minimum make playoffs for sure. There's no way that they miss out on the playoffs. But I will say the West has been much more competitive this season than in past seasons. Really good to see. Frankly, in the past, I've just had no reason to keep up with Western Conference games. But I found myself this year actually watching West Conference games that aren't playoffs. Sitting down and watching random games because they've been good. The Western Conference is looking good, and it'll make for great playoffs over there. And obviously great inter-conference matchups. But with that being said, let's take a look at our opponent this weekend. As we've mentioned several times, we'll be playing the Charleston Battery. No, there's no the in front of them. Just Charleston Battery. Charleston has been on a real skid as of late. They're currently the second worst team in the East. As James so eloquently said last week, they are the punching bag of the Eastern Conference right now. But not so fast, because they did pull off a big 3-0 win this past weekend over Pittsburgh, of all teams. Pittsburgh, obviously such a talented team, a team we always have trouble with. And they managed to just absolutely blow them out. Before that, though, they'd lost to New Mexico at home, the Miami at home, and Indy all at home. the fact that the Rowdies are home this weekend and we'll have a full week to prepare should definitely bode well for us. But one thing to focus on here a little bit is some injuries. I mean, obviously, we have some of our own injuries with Steven Dos Santos and whatnot. Um, I hope this week should be able to buffer out any other injuries that have been looming. We have that full week of rest and restoration, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, James, but I think we have a couple more weeks of just like a one game a week. Am I right?
Don't think that we have any more like mid-season games until we get into September or October, possibly.
Right, right. So anyway, like I said, that week and upcoming weeks, I think will serve well for us. But moving in a little bit into the Charleston scouting report, Charleston has almost exclusively played a sort of 4-2-3-1 formation. And they have definitely dangerous players, including their goal scorer and sort of shining star in the midst of a pretty ugly season. Augustine, one of those Williams. I'm forgetting how to pronounce his first name, but we'll go with Augustine Williams here. He's been the head goal scorer for Charleston here and has definitely been their most dangerous threat. So definitely somebody to keep an eye on this Saturday, as well as Cicero and former Rowdies midfielder Dominic Oduro has actually signed for Charleston. I believe this is his first year with them. If I'm not mistaken. Last game, he actually came off the bench in the 89th minute, so didn't get a ton of playing time. We'll see if he gets more time in his sort of homecoming back here at Al Lang Stadium. Another thing to note here is that some of their most dangerous players in Etienne and Patterson may be back from their stint with Grenada, who has been playing in the CONCACAF Nations League, as well with all the other CONCACAF teams. But even with those possible returning players, this is a team that, frankly, as we've talked about, doesn't have a lot going for it. With the exception of this maybe momentum of that 3-0 win against Pittsburgh, I mean, we should be expecting a win, especially with how we've been playing and the momentum we have in these unbeaten streak right now. I think anything less than a win would definitely be a disappointment for sure. So I think it's a time for a statement win. Predictions will be interesting. I'm excited to hear what you have to say, James, because I have a pretty high scoring prediction on my end of things. I think we can certainly, I don't want to say blow out Charleston, but I think we should expect to win pretty comfortably. What do you think, James?
Yeah, we have gone now 5 games unbeaten at this point, and I'm really thinking that what we need to show the league is, you hate to have to put it this way, but that's kind of the way the narratives are written. You want to show the league that the Rowdies are back, and after going 5 games unbeaten, I would like this to be that real statement win for us. So, Carlos, do you want to do your prediction first, or do you want me to go first?
I'll take a prediction first here. If you've been around the Rowdies, you know Mitchell Loster. He's always up there leading the chants in Ralph's Mob. And he always has a bit of a mantra. He likes to say 4-1 to the lads. And I think for the first time in a long time, I'm going to agree with him. I think we win 4-1. I think we're going to let up a silly goal sometime like in the 70th or 80th minute. But I think by that point, we'll be winning pretty comfortably, maybe 3-0. And then Lucky Mkosana gets some, just random goal in like the 85th minute. I'm hoping Guenzati gets a start here, as we've talked about. I think this is a chance for him to get his goal scoring back underway. I think he's been on the bench long enough. Hopefully he breaks that record that he's just kind of been sitting on for a little bit at this point. The headline even kind of went away at this point because he hasn't been playing much. But I think this is a time for him to maybe even break that record. So I'm going to take a 4-1 win, pretty comfortable win. And I think anything less than a comfortable win against Charleston will be a little disappointing and a little scary.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I was definitely thinking along the lines of Mitch Loster and his usual score line. So if you've taken that, I'm gonna not do that. I'm gonna take the same. I'm gonna take the same goal differential, and I'm going to say that the Rowdies win 3-0.
That's fair. I'd love to see a shutout. Don't get me wrong. I hope you're right. Maybe even 4-0. Who knows? We'll take a bunch of goals in the shutout.
Yeah, I would like one. I would not mind a shutout one way or another, but also 4-1 would be pretty good, and nothing that I would complain about. So that will do it for our preview. We are going to get into our one more thing segment here before we get everyone out, and on to whatever next podcast is in their lineup. Timmy Mel was loaned to Chattanooga Red Wolves, and he actually started for them this past weekend in the USL League One game that they had. So good luck to him out there. I think that it's probably for the best right now. Timmy Mel was not, able to show, I think, in the games that he had, that he was up to what Neil Collins needed at the moment. That certainly does not mean that he is capable of reaching those heights. That does not mean that he is never going to do it or anything like that. But right now, what he needs is playing time, and he is going to get that at Chattanooga Red Wolves. So this should work out for everybody, in my opinion. And then the next thing, this is something that we've talked about already a couple of times, but Jordan Scarlett getting called up to the Jamaican national team is awesome. It is awesome, big congratulations to him. This is the first time that he has been called up for Jamaica. He was born there and then moved to America as a youngster. He lived in New York and he went to college. I believe Iona is in New Jersey, but all around that same area. He played for the New York Red Bulls 2 team until he came down to the Rowdies, and obviously we all know how good he's done with us since then. So I think that I think that he really deserves this. It's something that he has earned. Jamaica does call up a lot of players from the USL Championship level, including Speedy Williams from the Miami. He was on this Jamaican team all along. Kevin Lambert from Phoenix Rising. He is a frequent player for or a frequent call up for Jamaica. Another player that you're going to see, and the name that you'll be familiar with, is Junior Flemings, JJ Flemings. He was with Birmingham Legion last year, and he actually signed for a club in France's second division. He's been playing with them. So it's not like Jamaica can't dip into this well, so to speak, for players. I think that it was just they never really wanted to go with somebody who was untested on the international level in a game where, they have had to, since November, or excuse me, it's been October, I should say. They've been trying to qualify for the World Cup. I can understand, there's no manager in the world who wants to give a player their debut in a game that is as significant as a World Cup qualifier. Now, these Nation Leagues games, I don't think they're anywhere near as significant as World Cup qualifiers, but they are competitive. So it's also probably hard to just call him up for one of those. And right now, he is being called up because they have had a bit of an injury crisis at the back. Whatever it takes. I really don't care one way or another. He deserves this. And I actually wrote a piece in October saying that he would be a good call-up for Jamaica, even if it was as a depth piece. Like I said, somebody that you don't want to throw in, give him his first cap in the middle of, the biggest game that Jamaica have had in several years, because they're still trying to qualify. I get that. But here, with the injury crisis and with Jamaica having already kind of secured their spot in League A of the CONCACAF Nations League, the Nations League, I think that he is good enough, or good enough that in this position where they're playing Mexico on a game where they're probably expecting to lose anyway, and that is built into how they keep themselves up in League A. It's okay. This is a game where he can play, and I really hope that he gets some minutes. Not only that, but I think that this should hopefully lead to him getting more call-ups in the future. And as Rowdies fans, we're going to have to possibly deal with him missing games if that's what that means going forward. But in all honesty, I say embrace it. I say embrace it because it's a good look for the club, and it is a good look for all of the players within the club that say, hey, you can sign for this team and you will still be eligible to play international minutes. Steven Dos Santos could possibly play for Cape Verde, for Cabo Verde, as you said. He was not called up and has not been, I don't think, in many years at this point, if he ever was. So it would have been cool to see, but there are other players who are eligible for national teams on this Rowdies roster, and they deserve their chance. I'm sure that if one more player gets it, then more national team players in the future will be able to look at us and say, this is a pool of players that we should not ignore.
Right. And one more thing to add there on the Jamaican national team. Another shout out to the Pittsburgh Riverhounds goalie that we faced and put 3 goals on. Jamali Waite got called up to the Jamaican national team as well. So good for him. Always fun to say that we put up 3 goals on an international caliber goalie.
Oh yeah.
So that's great to see. And also another note on Timmy Mel. He was actually, I don't know if you saw this, he was in the League One Team of the Week for his performance. So congratulations to him. He's starting strong. Are you kidding me? 1 game, 1 Team of the Week. That's good to see from our Loney. So all the best to him, and I hope he does well out there in Chattanooga. Last thing to say on our little one more thing here segment, turn up for Pride Night. Saturday night, the Rowdies, like we said, will be hosting Charleston Battery. There's a lot going on in the world, so what an opportunity. You can go to a soccer game, take in a great game, and show solidarity, and enjoy a great atmosphere at Out Lang. I mean, what kind of lunatic wouldn't want to do that? Are you kidding me? It'll be a great time, and I'm so excited to see all of you out there for what I'm sure will be a packed crowd, good atmosphere, and as we've predicted, hopefully a big win for the Rowdies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, like you said, this is a good chance to get out there and show your support, but also show your support for the community overall. This is going to be a good game, so it's definitely the time to do that. So everybody, thank you for tuning in. We will see you on Saturday night. I think that all of us are going to be able to go out there. So
Yes, sir.
join us, and also please join us online as well. We are also accessible there. You can follow RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at RBLR Sports. You can also get at me on Twitter. I am at RBLR James K. Carlos, where can they get at you?
Come drop a follow at Carlos TPA10. Again, my Twitter is all over the place. I'm either complaining about lightning ticket prices or tweeting about the Rowdies. But by the way, have you seen these lightning prices for the Stanley Cup final? The first
I
home
saw
game,
it from your tweet.
it's crazy. People are asking for it's like just north of 1K for nosebleed seats. Are you kidding me? That's crazy. Hopefully I can take advantage of my 2 more years in college and try and sneak out for the student rush if there's any tickets left. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Hopefully we just win the Stanley Cup and I won't mind, right?
Yeah, exactly. If we get another boat parade, then we'll all at least be able to attend that one way or another.
Right.
But to follow up with all of that, the next RBLR podcast on the feed is our Stanley Cup final preview. So do not miss out on that. Obviously, there's a lot to go over with our opponents, Colorado Rapids, and we won't bump Eureka for being from Colorado originally. He's obviously going to be supporting the Lightning. We all know it. We all already are aware of where he's coming from. Don't you worry, everybody listening. Just tune in and make sure that you get the inside scoop from our from our fan out there, or from our resident Coloradan. And I should say the Colorado Avalanche, not the Rapids. The Rapids are obviously the MLS team. I'm still stuck on soccer brain, obviously. But yeah,
I think we could sweep the Rapids pretty comfortably on ice. I'm not gonna lie. That would be I'm comfortable saying we could sweep the Rapids in 4.
They have at least 1 Canadian player, so maybe they would be able to have one competent skater out there. I'm not sure about the rest of them.
Yes.
But yeah, so check us out, and you will be able to hear that preview of the games against the Colorado Avalanche, as everybody knows. You can do that on Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as YouTube and all other major podcast platforms. Like I said, please check us out, and we will get with you again next week after a couple of Lightning games, after another Rowdies games, and as always, come on, you Rowdies.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.